only 1 to 2% of the Chinese population speaks English, and yet Xi Jinping, the president, studied in San Francisco. He even has a famous picture with the Golden Gate Bridge behind him. And ultimately, they have been trying to take out US partners. I don't know how they even communicate, I suppose, with the few ones that do speak English, which is a large population in such a vast base. And the Panama Canal was something that was built by Americans. And American men really gave their lives to do it because it was very hard at the time to do it. It didn't have beautiful infrastructure, an air conditioner, and gels that it could pass on your skin so that they would repel mosquitoes. You had no such thing. You had a bunch of mosquitoes, a bunch of disease, and many of these men died of disease. They died of exposure. They died of overwork from the heat, from accidents that happen across across the project of building it, across the process of building it. And now China is just sweeping in, and with some deals, some loans, and some offers of cheap manufactured goods, they're attempting to overtake the canal. Chinese companies in the state are the same thing. There's no meaningful difference between a Chinese company and a Chinese state agency, a government agency. There's no difference. And that's why, TikTok was ultimately bought by the US government, largely also because they didn't want to be controlled by the Chinese state. They didn't want to give that power. And of course, there could be some separation in some cases, but it's very small. Just look at what happened to Jack Ma. He was the richest man in China, and he got his assets stripped from him. He had a bunch of regulation thrown on him in an evil way and in a tricky way by the government, by the Chinese government, in order to take out his assets, to take out the advantages his company had in operating. And as a consequence of that, he really lost a bunch of his assets. He lost his freedom, and he fled to Japan, which is where he lives now. But China has a bunch of manufactured goods and has a big consumer base that wants to buy many of the goods from Latin America, from Panama. And they want to buy, I don't know exactly what, but like agriculture. They certainly want to use their port, and exchange are willing to pay. But what happens to that? As a Chinese company controls the canal, the Chinese government also controls the canal. And I saw Marco Rubio talk about it in an interview he did recently, the current Secretary of State. And he basically says that it gives the Chinese government the power to shut down the canal, and with it, shut down the passage of all American goods, which is of course not good, and would amount to a bellicose act, which would ultimately lead to a major conflict. But it would really harm the U.S. And so he's saying that that control cannot be afforded to be allowed. The canal was given to Panama a long time ago, as a gift of friendship and as an alliance that would ultimately also benefit the U.S. It would be under the administration of Panama, and the U.S. wouldn't be exacting tolls from them, and it would allow their population to benefit from it. But it wasn't done with the intention that they would then turn around and sell it to China. That wasn't the original intention of the deal, because if that happens, the U.S. would be very harmed by an act of altruism they took in the past. And so I think there will be moves to prevent that from happening. And I think it's very interesting. It's a very interesting foreign policy problem, a very particular problem. It's amazing that the US government can focus on so many fronts all at once, whether it be in the Middle East, in Eastern Europe, in Panama, Latin America. And there's really, geographically, certainly geographically, the Panama Canal is more important than Eastern Europe and the Middle East for US interests, because otherwise the passage of goods from the US is not going to happen, because the US is geographically close and closest to those countries in South America, including Cuba, in Central America, including Cuba, Mexico, and in Latin America as a whole. And it's right in the border, and a lot of problems come from there. And a lot of problems for national security and for the ability for the US to operate as an independent player and assure its subsistence, its access to resources, to agriculture, and so on, would depend and rely on those countries. And so I think that will be a front in the future, a change in foreign policy focus, because yes, attention can be divided, and yes, there can be a lot of attention paid to all these fronts equally, but ultimately the quality of that attention will reduce. And so there needs to be increased focus, I think, in stuff like Panama. It makes sense. It really makes sense. And Rubio also spoke about the US having to pay higher tolls than other countries in many cases because of these Chinese companies' policies. And I think it's really complex. I also think that A hot conflict with China should certainly be avoided, and I think it will be avoided because it could lead to the end of the world as we know it. The Earth would go back to being a flying rock with only microorganisms on top of it, maybe some fish, certainly bacteria would be able to survive, some birds, but very few humans. As Einstein used to say, he said, well, I know that Second World War was fought, and I don't know how World War III will be fought, but I know how World War IV will be fought will be with sticks and stones. There will be no Fourth World War because there will not be countries to mobilize. There will not be armies at all. You go back to tribal life in a nuclear wasteland, and that's not good. That's not good. So conflict should be avoided to all extents. But as Rubio says, he's not willing to give up or deprioritize national security to do it. He would like to do both together. But anyways, I think this is all very interesting. I'd like to know, what do you think about it? What are your opinions on what foreign policy should look like for the US and global commerce? How should goods and services be sold and bought? And to assure a greater flourishing of the interests that are valued by whoever's speaking and thinking, by us. So I would like to hear your opinion in your comments down below. I really would ask you to subscribe, leave a like in the channel, and to make sure to support us so that we can make more videos for you. It has been a pleasure to have you watch this video, and I hope that you have a great day. Take it easy. Peace.